Welcome, everyone, to the Finance and Administration Committee meeting on September 16th, 2024. I am calling this meeting to order. As we gather this morning, we acknowledge on behalf of the County of Renfrew and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We thank these people and express our respect and support for their rich history. We are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. And at this time, Connie, has roll call been taken?
Through you, Chair, yes, roll call has been taken and we have quorum.
Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? I see none. At this time, I have a recommendation that the minutes of the August 15th, 2024 meeting be approved. May I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by the member from North Algona-Wilberforce, seconded by the member from Killoughby, Haggerty, and Richards. Were there any errors or omissions? I see none. All in favor? And I have a recommendation that the closed minutes of August 15th, 2024 meeting be approved. May I have a mover and seconder, please, to get them on the floor? Moved by the warden, seconded by the member from North Algona-Wilberforce. If there were any errors or omissions, we will have to take those into close, but were there? Seeing none, all in favor? Wonderful. And at this time, I will turn it over to Craig for his administration report.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, one and all. My presentation, or my report, starts on page 11 of your package. And the first four items can be taken as a whole in terms of pieces of information stemming from the Health Committee last week. These are four business cases from the long-term care homes that Mr. Blackmore put forward to fill out the roster of staff, and the information is there for your reading and for your information. Mr. Blackmore is in the room should you wish to have any further information on those items. And item number 5 is a piece of information, is a summary of all of the items that have gone before you in the different committees in terms of the delegated authority bylaws that have been run through the corporation in the last, within the last month. Those are the 5 items. They are brief, Chair, but I can have Mr. Blackmore elaborate if you'd like on any of the previous information items when we go back through.
Absolutely. So we'll just go back to information item number 1. The rec programmers. Number 2, the business case for the manor and the lodge. Number 3, the business case for the lodge. Number 4, the business case again for the lodge. Member from North Algona-Wilberforce, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question for Greg, and it's in regards to all 4 positions. What will the timing be for the posting of these, or will this happen once finance approves, or does it have to come back to County Council?
Sorry, Mr. Blackmore.
Thank you, Chair. Through to the councillor. The intent is to proceed with the hire of these individuals immediately.
Excellent. Anything further? And finally, number 5, the delegation of authority. Seeing none, then we will move on.
Thank you, Chair. And in terms of, the format of the next item is it's a bylaw. What I'll do, or what I'll ask of you, Chair and committee, is that we'll read the recommendation. I do have a bit of a presentation between Gwen and myself to work through, but if you like, I'll read the recommendation. Is that the Finance and Administration Committee receives the draft 2024 procedure bylaw as information, and that staff be directed to present the proposed changes to the bylaw, including the structural changes to the committee of the whole structure, and that staff be directed to seek a legal review of the amended procedure bylaw, and that the Finance and Administration Committee recommend to County Council that staff be directed regarding changes to the County of Renfrew procedure bylaw as amended.
Thank you. I'll ask for a mover and seconder to get it on the floor, please. Moved by the member from North Algona-Wilberforce, seconded by the member from Laurentian Hills. All right, let's see the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So what I've done what we've done is assemble. Well, let me back up before I get to the presentation. So the procedure bylaw has is your document, and is your document on how meetings are to be governed. It's how we indicate to the public how we operate, what our business is, and how we conduct it. So this is your manual. This is our manual on how meetings are done. There is reference, of course, to the Municipal Act. It is under Section 238 that we must have one of these. Of course, you know this because we have one currently in place as Bylaw 8510. So the background is that in 2010, a full review was done. Of course, many amendments have been made. I can't remember how many amendments, but there's got to be north of 8, I think, at this point, if not 10, over the course of the last 14 years. When we talked to individuals around our own senior leadership team and with members of council through the meeting of the striking committee, it was felt that it was time for a fulsome update and a renewal of this of the procedure bylaw. And of course, there's been several updates and amendments since then, so we've got some new legislative that we just need to work all into one, so we're not hunting and pecking for different pieces of legislation throughout the years. I've made a note here right now, just because this is going to come up through the course of the day, is the committees currently, how you operate is on a series of standing committees that are separate from council meetings, and you meet individually as a committee of different composition, between 7 and I think to 9 or 10 is the maximum number, but typically around half of the number of members of council sit on a committee. Each of you sits on 2 committees throughout the month. We are seeing more and more duplication of our efforts and our presentations and collaboration across all departments. Last month, I'll note we made the same presentation 5 or 6 times to each committee. And this month we're seeing some more duplication of efforts. So we're just trying to find ways of being efficient in terms of not being duplicitous in our presentations. And of recent, just an increase in absenteeism. We absolutely understand the conflict with your lower tier duties, your local municipal duties, and we understand that the requirements for meetings can be onerous, and we're looking at different ways to alleviate some of those pressures, but still devote the time required to move the actions and the recommendations and the requirements of the county forward. So, is this the next slide? Right. We have started with the procedural bylaw earlier this year, just looking at what amendments would have to be made. Of course, when Gwen came on board, Ms. Dombrowski came on board last August now, to take a peek, we noticed some discrepancies, some inefficiencies, and we wanted to make those changes. So we've been out and about looking at different upper tier procedure bylaws, looking at best practices and talking to our peers. We've had meetings with our senior leadership team, and of course we met with our striking committee just last month to discuss opportunities and moving forward. So what is being brought back now is a revision to the procedure bylaw as a whole. And what we're hoping to suggest to you today is a number of changes that again will hopefully achieve greater efficiency and greater communication to the broader public. So just in terms of our direction, this is a complete reworking. This is a complete replacement. We would have loved to have shown you a bold and strikeout version, but the bold and strikeout version was somewhere in the, I think it was about 200 pages by the time that all the amendments were done. And about 5 days of solid work were committed to actually making these changes. So it's a complete replacement of bylaw 8510. For the most part, it maintains the context and integrity. There's been some shifting around and some flow to the new procedure bylaw, so that's why it's it looks maybe a little bit different to what you have. And we're suggesting the implementation of this, should you move forward, is in January. There's some legwork to still be done, and it doesn't make sense to do this in October. So we're suggesting some time to allow this to gel with everyone and implement the changes in January. So some of the changes, this is my clicker. So the meeting principles remain the same. The majority have the right to decide, the minority have the right to be heard. All members will have the right to the information to help make decisions. All members will have the right to an efficient meeting. All members have the right to be treated with respect and courtesy, and all members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. This is a standard principle to every procedural bylaw, and we built this into the revisions. So what is committee of the whole? So we're suggesting moving to committee of the whole. Many of you already have committee of the whole in your own municipalities, and we're suggesting the change to county council to adopt this methodology of meetings. Basically, a committee of the whole is a committee made up of all members of council. It's designed to streamline discussions around what goes on, so each one of you will hear the discussions at each level of the committees as we move on, to allow for the flow of information to be maintained at the appropriate level and the appropriate context in each meeting. Oftentimes, for no fault of anyone, we will have a meeting after a meeting after a meeting suggesting the same things, and the information is not the same at all three meetings. The information is the same, but perhaps the narrative may change just because of questions asked or answered or posed. So this is to remove that and allow you all to be part of the conversation right from day one. So the reports will appear on every meeting. That's just an aside. The procedural bylaw still allows for standing committees within that context, so the standing committees would be part of the overall still division, I suppose, if you want to call it that. There'd still be a number of committees that would make recommendations to a county council, and I'll work through with Gwen how it will work maybe when we get to the end of the presentation of these points. Because of what we offer to and on behalf of the City of Pembroke, we're suggesting a change from our number of committees, and we still can obviously massage this, is stick with the three we have now. We call corporate services as opposed to finance and administration. The names are neither here nor there. Development, property, operations, and one larger joint services where members of the City of Pembroke would sit on that one along with all of you, and that's where all the shared services would be discussed in this meeting. The terms of reference, of course, all this is in your packages. So how it would work. So the reports are on the committee of the whole, and that would be, let's just frame it this way. Never mind the slide, because it's easier just to kind of contextualize how it is. The day would start, maybe I'll just flip it. Do we have a slide on that, Gwen? I just want to see if there's, right, let's just go there. The month would work like this. Every second and fourth Wednesday, because that's the day it seems to be working with everybody's schedules. We polled all your municipalities to see who had meetings when, and every second and fourth works. Every fourth Wednesday you're here already. Every meeting would start with a county council meeting, right? So you'd have a meeting, and stick with that idea just for a second. Every meeting would start with a county council meeting where items of the day would be dealt with that needed ratification. They would be followed immediately by the standing committees of that day, and we're proposing of those four committees, 2 on each of those meetings. So on the first meeting, you'd have a joint services and corporate services day. County council, joint services, corporate services, you're done. The next week, or the fourth Wednesday, that county council again would start that meeting, and those decisions of those 2 committee meetings would be ratified. Then you go into your standing committee, well, all other items of county council would be dealt with, and then you'd go into development of property and operations, have those committees discuss, then you'd have another 2 weeks after that before county council ratifies those decisions. What that allows for is what we like to call a sober second thought, allows a cooling off period, allows us to discuss items and bring back any changes or recommendations back to that county council meeting. So that's how the flow would work, and it makes it a little more clear in how it would work. Sir, go ahead.
Like a 2-week efficiency.
Yeah, 2-week efficiency, exactly. So you always have, so what we're seeing more and more at the pace of government, things are rapidly happening, and this allows county council to deal with items where you need to ratify items every 2-week period, as opposed to waiting a whole month for items if they're of importance or you need a quick response. In terms of numbers, right now we have on average 11 meetings, pure county council meetings. Yes, we would have 20 council meetings because we'd be working over the course of about 10 months. But your number of committee meetings and your commitment to it is down from 30 down to 20 because it's only done on those 20 meeting days, if you will. So there's a bit of efficiency in terms of meetings and your meeting schedules here at the County of Renfrew and Pembroke. The advantages the agenda items will have the entire county council considering issues. Of course, you are now all free to deliberate and debate as opposed to waiting for the information to come to your committee or back to council and waiting 3 weeks. So you're all able to hear everyone's questions all at once. We're suggesting that the debate will be more productive and more collaborative because you're all hearing from each other all at once as opposed to not having the conversation truncated by different committees over the course of different days. The council meetings would typically, or the committee meetings would be typically longer. The council meetings might be a little tighter because you're hearing all those, you've already heard the information, so the council meetings will be a little tighter and shorter, but the committee meetings might be a little longer to hear debate. And then, of course, you'll hear recommendations and presentations as a whole. I'll state, where's consent items in the back? Kind of skipped over the consent items. If I can get my clicker to work. I'll go back to one item that will be back on the reports now. Often, at committees, we would see an agenda that is a number of recommendations, like today's, a number of recommendations, a number of bylaws, and a number of information items. What the new efficiency model would pose to you would be now a committee package that would have your resolutions and your presentations or your bylaws brought out to be discussed. All the other items that are often presented just as information items, as FYIs, here's what's going on, would just exist as a package, as a consent item to be adopted as a whole. Should a member of council wish or committee wish to pull them out to be discussed, then of course pull them out and have that discussion. We often determine, based on previous discussions with you or the flavor of the day, what items are important. I'll use the development of property meeting just because it was last week. We had an item from Mr. Howarth on the provincial policy statement and the changes to that. It was an information item. Mr. Howarth presented to you on that, but it's a significant item. There's no real action that came out of there. It was just an information item. In the future, that item might be Mr. Howarth would actually give a presentation on the provincial policy statement to you all, and with an action that staff be directed to bring this forward as a new official plan bylaw. So there would be more motion in that. Other items about perhaps summer company or starter company that are just by route, here's what's going on, here's the important items, would exist. And you would see that as information. They won't be lost. The public is still hearing about all these items, as are you, but they're informations that you can read at your leisure and ask questions to move forward. Let me skip forward or skip back to some more advantages. Again, still open and transparent. You're hearing everything. Sober and second thoughts, as would be discussed. The staff time would be reduced. The amount of meetings and reports generated would be potentially reduced in this new format. And we actually would allow for a lot more informal discussion at the committees because you're all having the same discussion all at once and all coming from it from a different viewpoint. Yeah, and if we're talking about one item that may not have been in your wheelhouse in operations, but you might not sit at operations in the past, this will actually have that discussion all at once and hear it all at once again. The current system in place, we're noting that there's limited cross-committee collaboration because we are, under the current system, needing to speak to each committee individually. There is some fragmented decision-making, and it is very time-consuming and duplicitous, as we said earlier. This is just how things would be laid out in terms of committee of the whole. There'd be staff reports, the consent reports are spoken to. If there's any presentations to be had, correspondence, and of course notice of motion and new business. Council would be reduced, if I would, to final disposition or the final recommendations to be ratified. Any public and community presentations, those who are not specific by staff, it would be ones open to the public, like we've heard on climate change or on United Way. Those things would be open to attending to council. And then, of course, reports from external boards and agencies like we have now, bylaws, adoption of minutes, and announcements. The other significant change, Chair, do you want me to, I can continue with significant changes and we can go back as a whole, or? I'm fine to go through with this and we only have a couple more slides. Okay, thank you, Chair. All right.
Madam Chair, if I could, just for the public record, I'm quite certain that the intent of Mr. Kelly is to use the term duplicative
Yeah, that's
as opposed to duplicitous.
Duplicitous
They
would be
are two
entirely
distinct
different.
things, and I have
Yeah.
never presumed that staff in any way have been duplicitous the entire 10 years that I've been here. And I do not think that that is the intended phrase I think it is duplicative is perhaps the word that Mr. Kelly wishes. And I think it's important for the public record that we not do, at least I do not perceive staff of ever having been duplicitous.
Oh, thank you to the member, because after the first time I said it and the second time I said, I know that I said it the first wrong, one time wrong. So thank you very much.
I was gonna
I shall not use that word ever again.
I was going to stop you, but then I'm known for, correcting people.
No,
so
you
I
should correct people when they're wrong, Chair,
No.
and I was wrong. So, however, the next slide was the other major change to the procedural bylaw was the term of warden. So the last time the term of warden was reviewed in terms of a change of length of time was in 2016. At that time, County Council had a motion to leave things as a status quo. Not dissimilar to 2016, the role of the warden is extremely busy. It requires a great deal of dedication, travel, and reading and advocacy and other items of note. The Warden's Caucus itself is a full-time job, and advocacy is a full-time job, never mind regular councils and meetings in the public to be out there and about. So as you all know, I shouldn't need to tell you this, but for the public, of course, every year there is an election for the warden. It happens in November, which means there are 4 elections throughout the term of council. I'll note, as noted on the slide, since 2002, this new council of 17, there has never been a member of county council that has sat for 1 year. It's always been for 2 years or more. So I'm just pointing that out. It is always, it's an anomaly perhaps, but that is the fact. So we're suggesting, or at least putting on here as a recommendation, that creating a 2-year term offers the following advantages. It allows for continuity and leadership. It benefits from the greater expertise. I think those who have sat in the warden's chair, or even the mayor's chair, understand that the first year is all about learning. The second year is really about doing. And it's a lot of learning, of course, with the warden. It's a lot of work. And next thing you know, your year's up, and then you're just starting again, perhaps with another warden. So 2 years allows all of council to be familiar with the warden and staff to be familiar with the warden, and the warden to be familiar with those peers across their network in the province. It eliminates, of course, the annual transition period, should there be a 1-year period between the elections. So that's a bit of it's not a lame duck period, but it's a bit of transition and learning and training for that period. And it does reduce some staff time on holding the annual election, of course, and the orientation. Of course, the 2-year term, there is a potential for reduced accountability or loss of interest from that one member of council that's the warden. Perhaps they determine that it's not their job, they don't like it, and want out, but that's not happened in 20-some years, I don't think. Well, no one's voiced it they wanted out, but even during the floods of 2017 and 2019, and pandemics.
Thank you for the qualification.
And pandemics, yeah. But they stuck it out because it allowed for that. And of course reduces the opportunity for other members to serve in that position. One would suggest a disadvantage that's not on there from either staff or council perspective is what if the warden elected is not doing their job, is not the best that he or she could be. Okay, well that is, I think there's other methodologies to deal with that, but that could be a case where you're stuck with a bad warden, quote unquote. We haven't been yet in 20 years. In 20 years we haven't been. 20-some years we have not. So again, we're not suggesting any particular year to have it take place. However, we have effectively put it in for 2026. The time to do this obviously would be now, or 2026 when there's still 2 years left in your term, or in the new term of council in 2026 after the election takes place. Again, there's some other notable changes which you would notice if you did a compare document. There's a better table of contents, there's some clarified roles. Of course, the clerk and the CAO role has been split, so some new clear roles for that. And just some wording on how staff reports are handled and some updated terms of reference, which, thank you to a member, we noted some little errors. After due diligence, we've noted some tiny little things that we'll need to administratively fix up in the terms of reference. But again, for the most part, we've captured, I think, what the intent was. So that, Chair, is for the most part, unless Mr. Dombrowski has anything to add, that's, there we are. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open it up. Questions, comments, concerns? Warden, please.
Just a comment. Thank you for this. Everything needs to be reviewed periodically and should be. And having come into these chambers with the present system, you know, your first blush is, oh, leave it alone, you know, your first thought. And then, but in thinking it my way through it, I think we do have to make a change, because I think we've all noticed, and we try to reach back when we're at county council, say, oh yeah, this is what we talked about in development of property, or this is what we talked about in health, and try and make sure that we bring information forward. I think we've been fairly efficient with it, but with the speed things are moving now, you know, when you look at the Heart Hub application, it's got to be complete within, you know, 19 or 20 days since the first announcement, which is just a tremendous undertaking. And in theory, 3 of our committees would be involved in that. And so to keep rolling that information through, when you could move it through a committee of the whole structure, 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks later to approve the actual disposition of the report. So I think we have to change, and we have to become more fluid and nimble. And you know, this makes sense. It's going to be a little awkward, especially for me, having figured out how to use the other system to advantage, or the present system. I think it's necessary. I think we need to be faster all the time. Not faster in the sense of just making decisions, but quicker in implementing our strategic plan, objectives, and then seizing initiatives. I don't think we make fast decisions. You know, they're usually good information, and it's going to be, and I think it's actually going to end up being more work for us, because you'll have to really dig down and read and think your way through it and get your questions ready ahead of time, and then that'll stimulate more questions as a whole from everybody. So, but I think it's necessary. So I'm comfortable with it. I recognize we may end up tweaking it a bit as we move along, but I think it's a necessary evolution.
Thanks, Warden. That's exactly the note I wrote, is that so often when one of the chairs is doing their report at County Council, that they'll say, oh, we had a lot of discussion about this at F&A. So I was thinking the exact same thing. Member from Deep River, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple points of clarification. So when you talked about the consent agenda with the information items, and that a member could sever them or whatever, it was said that a member could sever them to speak to them. Could we not speak to them without severing them if we weren't making a change to that? That's one. The second, I'm concerned about the length of the meetings. I'm not sure that 8 hours, 7.5 hours in a day is going to be enough time to get through a council meeting and 2 committee meetings. So what's the process if that doesn't happen? Do we have to come back the next day? And that's taking a full day plus for us to do that. And secondly, I didn't hear, is the warden going to be chairing all of the meetings, or are we still going to have chairs of the standing committees?
Okay, now you guys are just stealing stuff out of my brain, because I wrote, does the warden chair the full meetings? And I also wondered about the length of the meeting if we have delegations. So those were the 2 notes I made as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to answer them in order. So the length of the meeting, in our research, from those who use this method of meetings, and to be clear, I think of your peers in Eastern Ontario, we're the last one actually. You were one of the last couple actually doing week-long committees. They all have adopted either singular council meetings, 2 council meetings, or committee of the whole. The intent of the length of the meetings, sorry, to answer the question and complete that thought, most committee of the whole meetings or counseling and committee of the whole meetings do not last 7 hours. They last about 4 or 5 hours. The longest we heard is about 3.5 hours, I think, from our peers. The intent of the consent items or information items is that they would be there for your reading and they would not be talked about unless really necessary. And I think that if I look at most agendas, if I look at an operations agenda, other than where tenders are being approved, their items are about line painting, road marking, other items that are important. I don't want to discount these items. They're important, but do they need a discussion for 15 minutes? I don't believe so. I think those are items that, as professionals, we can read these items and pull them out if really necessary. If the item it needs to be talked about for the greater of the conversation, then pull them out and have that conversation to be disposed of if necessary. But to have a presentation by a staff member or manager to talk for 10 minutes about making widgets, I don't believe that's necessary to move the business of the corporation forward, because it's already being moved forward. This is an information item. On your question of chairs, the standing committees would result in having a chair assigned to them. So yes, there would still be chairs of the committee. The warden still only chairs the county council. The mechanics of it all, the warden would chair the meeting. There'd be a brief recess. The warden would remove himself or herself from the chair, and the chair would get into place, chair that meeting, and then brief recess, and then go. It would just be a seamless flow, right? So the agendas, in terms of public notice, would say county council begins at 9:30. Joint Services Committee to take place immediately following county council. So regardless if county council takes 15 minutes or 45 or an hour, then the flow, the public has been notified that it's immediately following, so there'll be a flow. So the learning, the experience that we've had with all these municipalities and watching them, we've gone through other YouTubes, we've watched several hours of meetings of other municipalities. They flow very well. They flow very well from one to the other with the slight little physical in and out of the seat. There was a question, time, chair, and yeah, I think that was the 3. I think that was the 3, Chair. I think those are 3. Oh, delegations, right? You had a question about delegations. Yeah, the delegations, actually, it's been in your procedural bylaw. It's going to be really up to the chair. The procedural bylaw, I think we've made it 15 minutes now. I think we've reduced it to 15 minutes with an established timeline of 5 minutes per member of questioning, right? So, and I guess what we're suggesting to the chair, unless things are really abnormal or it really requires deep discussion, is that the chairs try to stick to those time limits. And our job as staff, when approving these delegations, is to ensure that they come in under a 15-minute timeline to present their information.
I did know that change, but I was still trying to figure it out in my brain. Member from Killaloe, Haggerty, and Richards, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think we are all about efficiency, and I think staff has come back and really hit the right chord. And it's very impressive that they're looking at efficient ways to improve us. No doubt there will be some cost efficiencies, I would believe. And I think that's very important for staff to include that in the next presentation. The other item that I was thinking about was, I'd lost it now. I'll come back.
I'll come back to you. I also wrote in bold letters, cost savings, how much? I'm interested as well with mileage and...
Mileage and meals, Chair, is what we're suggesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just that alone, not to mention the meeting we're missing.
Yeah, we're not, through you, Chair, to the rest of the committees for their takeaway, is we're not suggesting any change to the compensation, of course, right? We wouldn't suggest that one whatsoever. We're just suggesting that the obvious costs are the requirements of meetings. When we have all of you in attendance, has been a meal, and there is travel allowances, of course, paid to everyone coming in. So currently, though, you are coming in here 3 times a month. Some of you twice a month because you sit one day for twice. Right. So it's a bit of a math to do that. But there will be some cost savings in travel. I'm sure we could put a number to it.
I'd love to know.
Yeah. And one chair. Right. one chair
Right.
if we go from 5 down to 4, if we would adopt that model.
Right. All right. Apparently Dave got it back.
It came back. It was a boomerang. The other item I'd like to ask staff if they could they take a separate month, like say, this is September. Could you go back to May and do a mock-up of what the new format would be compared to that month? So like take, for example, if you had 7 meetings in May, can you do a future month with the same type of body, but into the new format?
It's actually something I thought about, and we thought about doing last week. It just was just trying to get what we got done. But I absolutely appreciate your comment, and something we could likely easily do by the time County Council comes around. It'd take, even August would be a good example, right? Even the last couple of months. We'll take a look at it by the time
Absolutely,
County
yeah.
Council comes around to.
Yeah, I understand this swallowed up a lot of Evelyn's time.
And a lot of time of staff.
Yes, go ahead.
Just to follow up, as an old school type person, I like seeing things on paper, and to see this, I think would be a lot really relevant to what we're planning, and I think to take a busy month, I think would be more important than a summertime month, because then you're getting the full impact. Thank you.
So you want staff to choose like the longest count? Okay, yeah, they got it. They figured it out over there. They caucused. Yes, member from North Elgin Wilberforce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, and I certainly agree that I think this is a step in the right direction. My question is in regards to the term of the warden. I agree that the move to a 2-year term does make a lot of sense based on the history. I guess my question is, in some cases, the warden has done a 3-year term or more. And in the event that it was, would it be a hard and fast 2-year term? Or if it was a 3-year term, then potentially the next term may only end up being a year. It depends on the municipal elections and who gets reelected. And does that cause any concern going forward?
No, that's an easy answer. Actually, we accounted for that. So that's why it's through you, Chair. That's why we're the suggestion, should it be changed, really should only be this year or in 2026 because of the 2 years remaining of this term, or allowing it to happen in 2026. The procedural bylaw allows for it clearly states it shall be 2 years with another 2 years beyond that as a maximum. So you could have one person sitting in the chair for all 4 years if they're reelected for the following 2, but there will never be a crossover. Well, should it be initiated either this year or in 2026, there will never be a crossover because 2 years, right? It'll always happen in an election or between the election of 4 years, unless, that's a whole bunch of what ifs. I'm not going to what ifs. The municipal world's not going to change to less than it went from 3 years to 4 years once upon a time. We went from 2 years to 3 years to 4 years. But I mean, if under the current scenario, it will never have a crossover between wards.
Member from Deep River, please.
Just curious, is there a provision for if the warden was to vacate the seat partway through? So for whatever reason got sick or resigned or whatever, there need to be a provision in there that the replacement would be for the balance of that term, because if it was 2 years, then it would cross over. So, and oddly enough, you'll recall that we endorsed FCM transitioning to 2 years, but it's actually going to be implemented next year. So it will actually straddle an Ontario and a Manitoba election, and so. But anyway, it is what it is. So.
But I was thinking the same thing, like in 2019 when I wanted to run screaming from the building because of the floods.
Well, we all did. So, Chair, and through you to Councillor Doncaster, so items around Section 28 deal with vacancies, so either absenteeism or forever vacancies. In the immediate absence of the warden, in terms of chairing a meeting, the suggestion is to maintain or at least implement that if there is a member on the current council who was a warden prior, would step into place as the acting warden for the chair of that meeting or chair of those meetings until it's determined whether or not the warden shall return or can be considered resignation. And there are steps in the procedural bylaw on how that resignation is handled, and it would be by a general election to the warden to fulfill the terms of that warden term, and then would kick in again at that November of whatever that 2-year term would be.
Anything further? Member from Edmundston Bromley, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and will certainly echo the comments that, in fact, let me preface my remarks. There were, in fact, 10. I have the current bylaw right in front of me, and there's a citation of all 10 amendments beginning in 2013, 3 years after it was first put in place. There has been 10. It is, in my estimation, long overdue. As committee has already noted, to have a fulsome review. I know one of the things that used to make me crazy was presiding officer. That thing seemed to just be a perennial loop to try and find what that meant and what it was referring to. So from that very perspective, it is appropriate that this be reviewed as a complete document more often. It should not be every 14 years. Perhaps every term of council, it should at least be reviewed. I don't know if that's perhaps too fast. So from that perspective, the review is appropriate. I am somewhat of an outlier, the yin to the yang that I'm hearing of the embrace of the changes. I'm more skeptical. And I do have to be careful because I have not had opportunity to review the actual draft procedural bylaw yet. And until such time as I do, I'm forcing myself to be very careful. I don't want to resist change just because it is change and because I'm in a comfort zone on what we have. But I have I'm going to refer to as a healthy skepticism at this point because I want to see that it's going to be better. One of the things that strikes me is I have routinely, outside of the two committees that I sit on, routinely review the agenda reports from all other committees, and if there's an item there that intrigues me, I certainly read the report on that, but if there's more information, I will often review the posted, rarely am I seeing it live, but often will review the posted meeting of that item. That's imposing nothing on any other member of council, that's what I do if there is an item that is of particular interest to me on a committee that I don't sit on. I have significant reservations about how much more workload this is going to put onto each of us as individual councillors because our focus is no longer going to be the two committees, it's going to be the entire business. And I recognize that there is a counterpoint. It is being advanced here. I disagree with there was a statement on one of the bullet points that this is more open and transparent. I don't agree with that at all. Now, particularly that minutes have never been a full discussion of the business, but now that we are posting all of our meetings on YouTube, there's Hansard. Hansard exists. So I'm quite concerned about what the workload may be for a fully engaged county council member moving forward. I don't think that's going to diminish. I think we may be transferring that. I think that until such time as I review it, I don't have a whole lot of comments on the gist of this themselves, though I note that we're already talking about the warden, and what would the warden be, and would it be 2 years, and would it be this and that. So confining then for the balance of my comments just on process, this is the user's manual for council, and somewhat to the public, notice, etc., are contained herein. But this is how we govern ourselves. And ideally, I think that this process would have engaged elected in it much earlier than it is. I don't know, I didn't hear Mr. Kelly suggest, I know that there was one of the slides said some time ago. I think that would have been an opportunity to have engaged, whether by means of outreach directly into individual councillors, any thoughts, concerns, comments that they may have on our current procedural bylaw, whether an ad hoc committee may have been struck. I did participate in the development of the most two recent procedural bylaws for the Board of Health. The first one was one of the standing committees engaged in that. The second one, the more recent one, there was an ad hoc committee struck to review that. I think it was 5 different committee meetings, probably 10 hours, where the actual board members that were regulated by the procedure had a direct input into its development. So ideally, I think that might have happened. We find ourselves here now, and I know that the desire, the goal here would be to have perhaps this in place for January. I think that still is reasonable, but I think there should be a process for this to be reviewed, because, we just spent 10 minutes talking about what the warden and the election of the warden, whether it would be 2 years, and that's just a very single item within our procedural. How that opportunity is presented to all of council to have an input into our guidance document. I have to presume both at the federal and provincial levels of Parliament, the rules of procedure are developed by the governing party, not by bureaucrats. So I think that there needs to be a full engagement. Even what I would suggest is in today's committee report, and this is absolutely accurate, I chair the striking committee. The staff be directed to review the committee and meeting structure for the County of Renfrew and provide a report to the Finance Administration Committee. I think that more accurately was that staff be directed to develop a comprehensive procedural bylaw, but that's not in that resolution. So I was somewhat surprised that this was happening, though again confirmed that it should be happening just the same. 14 years, it's overdue to have this. But I believe there needs to be a full engagement of council on a document that prescribes and proscribes our rights and privileges and processes. And that's what I would recommend, is that there be some forum for that, whether it's a dedicated council meeting a la last November, the November before, when we had our asset management meeting. This is a pretty pivotal document for guiding this and future councils. So I think that there should be some forum whereby there can be a dedicated discussion of this.
Craig, thoughts?
Well, that would be the will of committee and council, Chair. We had sought direction at the striking committee. I note the comment that whether this is a report or a very detailed result of review, it's neither here nor there. It's been drafted right now. So I would take direction whether to establish an ad hoc committee. That wasn't suggested at the striking committee to do so. But if that's the direction, of course, we would take the will of council to do that. I would be happy to entertain a number of folks. That said, this report will go to county council, and there'll be 2 weeks to determine if there's comments then, and we can have the discussions then, or at a special meeting. Again, the recommendation is your recommendation on the floor to dispose of as you wish, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, this is, once again, this is one that I would like all of county council to weigh in on, and committee of the whole would have taken care of that because we all would have been in the room. Just before I figure that out, we are going to have to figure out how to accommodate the 2 members of Pembroke during these meetings at the table. Just
I'm sorry, I think there's a section, I don't know, from 28
it was
or something. it talks about-
47, but
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, it was on page 47.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't know where to go with this. The recommendation's on the floor. So are you proposing something different?
I'm a little bit uncertain, actually, even what the recommendation is, because it begins by saying that we receive the draft, that staff be directed to seek a legal review, and that staff be directed regarding changes. So is that last sentence in the recommendation, is it left open-ended specifically to leave at the discretion of committee what that direction should be? Because I don't know what staff be directed regarding changes is. And is the anticipation that we be directed to accept the changes, recommend the changes, reject, repudiate?
Oh, I thought that was to county council. Okay.
Yeah, we had this discussion a few times, Chair. So really, is if you had changes today, if you had perhaps given a full review or had the time to actually, line by line, if this committee wanted to discharge staff with a number of singular items, to bring that back to county council with those changes. So basically as amended, right? To bring this procedural bylaw back as amended with the changes from your committee.
And I think one of the difficulties for some of us, I didn't make it through the entire document because a whole bunch of us were at a conference last week. So it was very difficult to get through everything over the weekend. Warden?
Okay, so in listening to my friend from Admiston, Bromley, I did. Okay, thanks. I could hear myself again. It wasn't pretty. I was, toying with the idea of, yes, maybe going ahead with a special council meeting to talk about this, but I'd hate to have us show up at 9:30, look at each other, be done at 10:30. So I would really need to be convinced that it would be worthwhile to book a day or even a half day to go through this, because I think it'd be very frustrating for a lot of people to drive up. I hear about it sometimes about committee meetings. I spent an hour driving here, or 45 minutes driving here, and I'm here for an hour, and then I have to wait for lunch 2 hours, then I have lunch, and then I have another committee meeting. So, I'm conscious of that. I am entertaining the idea of a council meeting, a half day to go through this, but I kind of have to be convinced that it's worthwhile. And I recognize the value of consultation. I don't know how many people really want to dive into procedural bylaws, to be quite honest with you. I did, and the one thing that I noted was 6.9, food within the chamber. Sometimes during our committee meetings, we bring, we eat and work through it. So that's the kind, those are the kinds of things that I noted, and there's some other things too, but, so anyway, that's just my comment right now.
I was emailing Craig on Saturday morning, and he was emailing me back. So then we had a conversation about, what his life has gotten to, that he's emailing the elected back immediately on a Saturday morning. Member from Deep River.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have as I was trying to hide the wrappers from my chocolate bars here, I was going to bring that up. It is what it is. I recall the Prime Minister being called out for pulling a chocolate bar out of his desk a few years ago in the House. So my question is, and I don't know that this affects anything, but has this been, is County Council's budget been taken into consideration on this? I don't know if it changes anything, but I just wondered if it did.
Yeah, through you, Chair. The budget there's no impact to the budget on the negative fashion. It's not going to cost the council more, right?
Yes, member from Admiston Bromley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In responding to the points that the warden made, I would be just as perplexed or confounded to try and estimate what the interest would be in engaging deeply on this. However, from my position, I would say it should be. I would put this document in the same place as our strategic plan, as our long-term financial plan, as our asset management plan. These are foundational documents, much more so perhaps to the elected than to staff, though they provide guidance to staff as well. So I don't know if council would be engaging on these, But in my estimation, it would be somewhat of a litmus test of council, because I believe that they should very carefully review this. Having not had any opportunity to review this, I do note that I did get a draft about a week ago, and then this agenda report was set out on Friday. Like that's precious little time to actually review and project what these changes may do. Just off the top of my head, even based on the report. So I did review the presentation, though not the draft procedural itself. So what I would say is, like, we don't currently have consent agendas at committee and council, but we have consent adjacent agendas. Generally, the information items, or certainly how it, my approach to it at in chairing the health committee, is the information items are a separate thing. We deal with those, and then we move on to the rest. And ultimately, those are all approved when we approve the report as a whole. And I believe that each one of the standing committees will be precisely the same thing. Resolutions get approved at each one of them, bylaws get approved at each one of them, but then there is an approval of the committee report as a whole. That's a consent agenda. The only distinction here would be that the default position is these are the information items, we're going to have a motion to approve them unless a member wishes to sever one of them to have a discussion on that one, and that should be their privilege and their right to do so. But outside of that, we don't do that, as I refer to it, the second lap, where we now go through the 6 information items that Mr. Blackmore has presented and afford the opportunity. In fact, the onus would then be on the committee members to say, no, I am not prepared to approve the consent agenda. I would wish for item number 4 to be removed, and then we can approve the consent agenda. So we're not far off of that. So even just to be able to work my way through, where is the win? How much time is this going to be saving us? What is the opportunity cost of the time that's saving? And as I'd indicated earlier, and I don't know the answer to that, I'll be quite frank, but I have not had opportunity to work my way through that, is this simply transferring more work prep time for me? Because if that's the case, then there's going to be a very big challenge there. We often are confronted in this room of how do we make it more accessible to sit on county council. And I'm sure that that was one of the underpinnings of the overall review that has been undertaken by Mr. Kelly and Ms. Dombrowski, and perhaps also Ms. Van Starkenburg. The whole team, got the team back together, the band back together. So these are the things that I need to work my way through, and I absolutely can't do that in the 3 days since the report was sent out. Perhaps I'm the slow learner in the room, but that's my challenge, is to understand that if we are going to be making substantive change, then I have to understand where it is changing for the better. And until such time as, and that's why I'm believing that a dedicated meeting, because there are going to be members that aren't present here today that will see this and think of things that I have not thought of. Fairness, haven't looked at it at all. In any event,
But
that's why I guess if we're looking for that direction, I would move that a special meeting of council be arranged. I would leave that up to staff. I'm presuming maybe November, so that we could close this off and be prepared for the new year, regardless of which decision the council would move in. But that would be my motion, that a special council meeting be convened in November with a single agenda item being the procedural bylaw review.
Okay, so thank you to Eagle Eye Evelyn, by the way. But Warden, what are your thoughts on this? Because it's you that's going to have to call the meeting, and it's, you know, I hear what you're saying. How engaged are people? Like, I completely agree with Michael that I want to go through it a few times, and I haven't even made it through it once.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Oh, so I'm sorry.
So we do have a proposed resolution on the floor?
Yes, we do. You're right. So we should vote on that first? Or do you want second? Sorry. Do you have a seconder for yours? You're making the motion. But do you have a seconder? Okay, member from Deep River. All right, so I'll call the vote. So we're sending this to us. Okay, well, okay, go ahead. I just wondered what the warden thought because
Okay,
he did.
so I'm
That's,
now of the opinion, as I evolved my thinking, that as long as we have a majority, like a quorum, then we have value in holding the meeting. And I think part of it is educating us as we move forward, if we do accept this new committee, the whole structure, but at the same time, I think we're going to have to educate the public. And as we know, it's significant milestones in this organization. Staff do tune into YouTube as well. And so I think when I look beyond the chambers, then I think we have a secondary role that's equally as important. So I'm of the opinion this is a significant event that is going to require quite a bit of education, just based on the conversations we've had in here as we evolve this document, and there may be changes once everybody's had a chance to look at it as well, and to avoid confusion and get to a final document. So I am evolved to the point where I'm in favor of the motion to have a special meeting. I would encourage it to be, in October, to be frank with you, because I think that gives time for any additional research and to get it to an end of November date, so it doesn't compress staff's time too much and be too focused on this project.
I'm also cognizant of the budget schedule that's in Daniel's report, so I think we're smashing these all together. Are there any other comments about sending this to it? Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. The only thing I was going to suggest was that instead of a special meeting, that we combine with a council meeting or a meeting that is scheduled already, so that everyone has plenty of time and set aside certain 2 hours to deal with the questions that are going to come up, as opposed to making a special meeting.
Respectfully, I think what Councillor Donahue is saying is right, is that this document is a document that we're going to live with for a long time, much like our strat plan, our asset management plan, all the other things that we do special meetings for. I don't think that this is a 2-hour meeting. Quite frankly, again, I haven't made it through the whole document, and I apologize for that, but I think there are going to be, forget about housekeeping issues and things like that. I think that there are going to be significant questions surrounding this. It's going to be a learning curve for the elected as well. Not new elected for 2026, but for anybody sitting, it's going to be a learning curve. So I'm just, and I also wonder about the amount of prep time, because it is going to be significant. Go ahead.
Can I just clarify the motion from Councillor Donahue? We're stuck in the procedure bylaw now, where the committee actually doesn't direct special council meetings, so they recommend to county council that a special meeting be held. So just reviewing the procedure bylaw, that's the chair, the presiding officer, can summon a special meeting, or the majority council petition for a special meeting. So I just want to clarify that we get the motion right.
I think perhaps the path of least resistance then might be that the Finance and Administration Committee recommend that County Council direct a special council meeting be convened. We haven't established, I'm certainly open to the timeline. I wouldn't want it to be early October, because we're already in the middle of September and we're going to have a council meeting next week. So I'm prepared to leave open in this resolution. You want it simply to say that the Finance and Administration Committee recommend that County Council direct the warden convene a special meeting specific to the review of the procedural bylaw in the fall of 2024. And fall can be interpreted as appropriate.
Yeah.
Thank you to the member.
Okay, yep. You're okay? Good. All right. So all in favor? And that carries. So the previous recommendation, all in favor? It is defeated. Good. Easy. And I also have a recommendation that the administration department report be approved as presented. Mover and seconder, please. Moved by the warden, seconded by the member from Laurentian Hills. All in favor? And that carries. And in the interest of not interrupting Daniel, can we take 5, please? Thank you. Welcome back, and I'll turn this over to Mr. Burke for his corporate services report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to committee. Information item number 1, attached you have 3 reports from the Ontario Property Tax Analysis System. The first being rates and ratios for each of the lower tiers and the County of Renfrew. The second being the levy and PIL in dollars. And the third being the calculation of the notional levy increase from the 2024 year. Now that every lower tier has confirmed their tax rate bylaws, the calculations are now available. Information item number 2 is an update on our central scheduling. As committee will recall, we had a resolution authorizing the study of a potential central scheduling system and to use $40,000 from the provision for unallocated funds. So we have formed a steering committee made up of several different membership of several different departments to study the issue through the summer. I've been meeting regularly. We've also gone on a bit of a road trip to some of our peers to figure out some best practices, the Pembroke Hospital, Leeds Grenville, Thunder Bay, and some discussions with the Ottawa Hospital. And we are optimistic that this is a viable solution. So we're going to push forward, and you may become aware of some public documentation such as a RFP going out with the premise that we have a costed solution for the 2025 budget. Item number 3 is the follow-up from last meeting for non-union salary grid adjustments. So just to provide some more information as requested, the current non-union salary compensation is based on County Council Resolution 2308-73, that the non-union salary grid be adjusted based on the June 12-month average of the Consumer Price Index for Ontario all items as determined by Statistics Canada, and that the adjustment will be effective for pay period 1, and the adjustment will not be lower than any negotiated increase with a union collective agreement. So the 12-month average CPI ending in June for Ontario all items is 3.08%. Miramichi Lodge, Bonashire Manor, and Paramedic Service CUPE agreements have negotiated 3.25% increases. ONA and RCHC CUPE are still in negotiations. So by the resolution, our non-union salary increase would be 3.25%. And then we've just provided some other background for the items or some other considerations, such as benefit increases that were negotiated in those union agreements, the size of the various union agreements, and a couple other points we're running into. So a bit of a joint effort between myself and Mr. Belmore to provide the background information. Information item number 4 is the budget schedule. And my apologies, on the printed budget schedule, you will notice that the budget workshop days are actually in the to be decided state based on our discussions this morning. However, the information item as printed has actual days there. Based on the outcomes of this morning's discussion, we will determine the budget days from there. So no fixed date for budget workshop yet. My apologies. I would also like to just draw your attention on the budget schedule to item number 7, Asset Management and Long-Term Financial Plan Preliminary Update to County Council at County Council on November the 27th. So this is our plan to bring forward sort of a state of the union of where we're at and what's changed since our May meeting, as well as a number of my colleagues and peers will likely bring forward what I'm calling pre-budget approval requests so that they can carry on with those projects they would like to see continue in advance of the budget, and that tenders and other items will continue to go out as the project allows rather than be held up by the budget schedule. So a bit of a new item for us, but we're going to try it out November the 27th. Item number 5 is an update from the Finance Division staffing. Our staff had put in a number of requests for classification review, which HR has duly done and determined that the position of payroll administrator be moved from Group 6 to Group 7, and that the 3 accounting technicians be reclassed to 1 senior financial analyst at Group 8, 1 financial analyst at Group 7, and 1 senior accounting clerk at Group 5. The grand total of the cost for this per 1 year would be $30,000, close to $31,000, and the revised amounts are contained within Employment Bylaw Number 1 in the HR report. And information item number 6 is a community paramedic reserve transfer, information item coming from the Health Committee, that the surpluses in the programs for the Community Paramedic Long-Term Care Program and also the RC VTAC operations be transferred into the Community Paramedic Reserve. Those programs end March 31st, and they finish the year slightly underspent, but with the ability to have administration fees retained by the county, and those fees have been transferred to the Community Paramedic Reserve. And that's it for information items, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we'll go back to information item number 1, the Opta reports. Information item number 2, central scheduling. Number 3, the non-union salary grid adjustment. Member for Mammoth Bromley, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could this be severed from the report and considered separately?
Yes, thank you. Item number 4, the budget schedule. Item number 5, the Finance Division staff update. Member from Mammoth Bromley, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Burke. So, if I'm understanding this correctly, there are currently 3 accounting technicians, and each of those, perhaps there are more, but this is speaking specifically to 3. So amongst 3 of the accounting technicians, there is a reevaluation and recognition of different tasks and requirements of each of the positions. So my question then is have we identified gaps that there's a requirement to have these positions, or have the positions that are currently technicians upgraded their skill sets that are now recognized for the skills they have? Because ultimately it seems like these are higher, at least the first 2. One is going from 6 to 5. The other 2 are increasing, going from 6 to 7 or 6 to 8. So ultimately, then, presumably the needs of the corporation are to have these new positions, and perhaps they were underfilled under the former regime. Is that accurate?
Through you, Madam Chair, that would be correct. So the scoring is not based on the skill level of the candidate, but rather the job description itself. And so for a number of years now, we've seen this where the requirements of certain provincial fundings or other things are increasing, and the job requirements for those higher, the technician levels have diverged from what they originally were. And functionally, that's what the scoring has shown us. So yes, this is the needs of the department as opposed to the skill level of the staff.
Okay. Anything further on this item? And item number 6, the paramedic reserve. All right, let's move on to resolutions, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 1, that the Finance and Administration Committee recommends that County Council support the request from the City of Quinte West Council requesting the federal government provide the same amount of funding that was allocated to municipalities under the AMO Canada Community Building Fund for 2024 to 2028.
Thank you. I'll ask for a mover and seconder to get it on the floor, please. Moved by the member for Mammoth Bromley, seconded by the warden. background's there. Discussion. Member from Deep River.
My concern with that is I think it's important that we advocate for an increase in that funding, and this we're only endorsing the status quo, which is not sustainable for us.
Exactly. I think that I like the resolution and I applaud Quinte West, but by the same token, where is the increase? Warden, please.
Well, I was going to make two suggestions, that we add a therefore and another therefore. So the first therefore would be that this not negate the province from participating in the AMO fiscal review, and as well that it also not negate the call by FCM for a new financing structure for municipalities. Like
Right.
Because, I don't want them to toss this out as the panacea, saying, oh, we've done this, so we can shut the door and not talk to any longer. So that, those are two important initiatives that are similar but different. And I don't think we should, I think we should put them on the government on notice that we know that this is not the answer. It is part of the answer.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we are going to throw out the baby with the bathwater and maybe take what Quinte did and make it better?
Yes, to acknowledge the work of AMO and FCM. Those are both valuable tools that both levels of government should pay attention to.
Okay, and the increase as well. And then if that goes to our locals, then we can all endorse it. I don't necessarily think that this is is of the essence. Perhaps this is something we could bring back to finance and admin instead of trying to rework it right now. What's that?
I think what the warden's suggesting is an entirely different motion that's being considered on the floor right now.
Yes, that's what that's what I meant. Sorry. A member from Addiston Bromley, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Perhaps staff or a councillor can provide clarity. I'm a little bit confused on this when it's talking about I think the preamble is discussing the COLA increases, or what could be presumed to be COLA increases year over year once the new formula has been established, are only 2%. Ultimately, everyone's allocation, I think on a 5-year basis, gets re-examined, and your growth relative to the growth of the nation as a whole determines what your percentage of the overall funding envelope from CCBF shall be. So we typically, in Admaster Brumley, have seen each of those, on those 5 years, have seen a reduction in our allocation. But once that reduction is enabled, then there is an annual escalation of 2%. And that seems to be what they're talking about up top. However, the resolving clause, or the first of the resolving clauses, appears to be suggesting what I believe has been FCM's position for a while now, and has in fact been affected by the federal government on 2 occasions since I've been in this room, which is a doubling of the allocations. Now, in this instance, the limitation, perhaps this is what I'm not sure, perhaps this is what Councillor Doncaster is making reference to. This is only suggesting it for a finite period of 24 to 28. I believe FCM's advocacy as it's time now to double this based on infrastructure, overall infrastructure challenges and pressures to the municipal sector right across the country, whereas this is suggesting only for that finite period. But it is suggesting a doubling of the federal gas tax, now Canada Community Building Fund. So is that a correct interpretation of this?
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe the resolution stating that the federal government provide the same amount of funding is in addition to the existing funding is what they're requesting. So they want a doubling, which did occur a few times in the last couple of years. But yeah.
I'm just glad that Councillor Donahue knows how they calculate the CCBF, because nobody seems to know that an OCIF and partnership fund.
Calculate the trajectory for putting a satellite in orbit around the Earth, if you'd like to know that one as well.
It's all a mystery. All right, so I'll call for the vote. defeat and bring it back with our own verbiage. All in favor?
Going to defeat?
Yes. Vote, no, don't vote in favor. Sorry. All in favor? Good, that's defeated. We'll bring that back. Budget
Sorry,
target.
Madam Chair, could we
yeah.
redo? I am uncertain of what we were doing
Yeah,
there.
if you don't mind, please. I was reading the actual motion from them, so I missed most of the
He was thinking
conversation.
of something else.
Yeah. Okay, guys, I know it's Monday morning, but let's stay on task, shall we? So what we want is to defeat this because we'll bring it back next month because time is not of the essence. We'll bring it back next month and we'll put our own verbiage to it, including the warden's suggestion of FCM and AMO and Councillor Doncaster stealing it out of my brain, that there should be an increase and that we should be told what that increase will be year over year, not just the 2%. Did that make sense?
If I might, though, that's what I was trying to get at in this. This is not saying just the 2%. This is actually advocating for a doubling, though it is only advocating it for a 5-year period, inclusive of 2024 through 2028.
Okay, that's not how the verbiage is a bit clunky, but that's not how I read it.
If I might, the very last 6 words
Yeah.
do say effectively doubling the allocation for those years.
Glenn, do you have a thought on that since you sit on FCM?
I do, and well, the advocacy that's being done is that it's permanently doubled. So that's one part of it. And secondly, and I'm trying to find it and I can't, there was an annual indexing on top of that also. And I forget if it was 2 or 3% or something. However, having said that, next September 18th and 19th, I will be at FCM meetings, and I know it's on an agenda because I saw it. I just can't find it right at the moment. So I'll have a chance to bring that back with specific wording on what FCM is advocating for. So maybe that can be worked into that resolution. I think the timing
That would
will
be very
work.
helpful, yes.
The timing will work.
And the word permanent would be grand. So, yes, Warden?
So what my thought is that now that this is defeated, if the members are comfortable with it, then we have a new motion which
Yep.
asks staff to further investigate a motion that incorporates Quinte West, the position of AMO, and the position of FCM.
And yes. Excellent. So you're going to move that.
I just did, yes.
Excellent. Seconded by the member from North Elgin Wilberforce. Now all in favor. Sorry, I was trying to work my way through that. All right, number 8, budget target.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation that the Finance and Administration Committee recommends that County Council approve the 2025 budget guidelines with a 3.25% annual levy target increase.
I will ask for a mover and seconder to get it on the floor, please. Moved by the member from Killaloe, Haggerty, and Richards, seconded by the warden. Let's talk about it.
Thank you. So similar to the prior year, our initial thoughts on the budget is that we would present a baseline of keeping the status quo service levels and incorporating any known factors. And then we would present a list of possible reductions to bring us to the council target of 3.25%, and then present a list of potential enhancements. So exactly the same approach as the prior year, to give staff an opportunity to plan ahead and work out where best to make suggestions for potential service level reductions as well as enhancements. And we've chosen the 3.25% to tie into the non-union wage increase and a number of our union increases, as that should present enough of a challenge to drive those discussions without requiring us to go into extreme contingency planning where we look at a number of options that we know are not really palpable to council.
Comments, questions, concerns? Member from Amherst Bromley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, once again, and certainly I'm disposed towards supporting this as a target. I do have a question, though. So at our August county council meeting, the municipal surplus that was then reported was 3.123 million. There were this was after adjusting for the temporary loan to Public Works impact. The actual reported was over $9 million, but a large $6 million of that was a temporary loan to Public Works. Though acknowledging as well that we still were awaiting the second installment of our CCBF funding of almost $1.5 million. We also, in last week's operations meeting variance report, the chair is present. So there was substantial deferral of work this year, but notwithstanding the deferral, there is still anticipated a surplus. And keeping in mind that all of that was still realized with almost $1 million additional allocated to Murphy Road and a substantial over budget, extra budget allocation to the Opeongo Road as well. All of that is preamble to Mr. Burke. So absolutely in concurrence that it is not a levy target, but rather specifies a target to capital reserves, contribution, a target contribution to capital reserves. I wonder if Mr. Burke could remind committee what is that target contribution?
Through you, Madam Chair. So our long-term financial plan was premised on a number of factors to carry the work that the long-term asset management plan built around 2% interest per year and replacing like with like. And then to fund that, we have our starting point of our reserves, our fundings, and then our suggested contribution was an increase year over year of $3 million, an absolute $3 million. And then we could adjust that based on the actuals we see. Either inflation is higher or lower, things have changed, and funding has changed as well. So what we'd be hoping to do to address Councillor Donohue's preamble is factor that into our suggested levy increase target, along with a number of other items we currently know about or can estimate. So the biggest two that come to my mind are committee approved looking at a new paramedic base was one, and the other one was the information we received earlier in the month regarding the RCHC building condition assessments. So we'll have to try and factor in a funding plan for those two items, or a plan of action, as well as take into account where we think we're going to end the year in our reserve balances, where we think our funding will land, and then work out a suggested levy increase for our tangible capital renewal reserve and carry that forward to the 2025 budget workshop.
Supplementary.
Thank you, and thank you through you to Mr. Burke. I actually had forgotten what the actual number was. And I recognize that June 30th is not December 31. There is much of the year, though certainly across the operations of the county of Renfrew, it is generally performing very well against budget. I know that from the Health Committee, which has a sizable portion of the budget, but I know also even Councillor Doncaster's committee or department, Public Works, has had a very good season. It has been reflected in the finances there. Ultimately, where I'm going with that is that $3 million exists at the end of the year. That's our contribution. Out of our surplus alone, we're having a contribution. And again, I'm only putting this forward just to put that into the context of the discussion, though I am in support of the 3.5% as the starting point.
3.25.
3.25, stand corrected, absolutely. I wonder if perhaps, Madam Chair, if Mr. Burke has any forecast on where he thinks that the surplus may end.
Oh, don't do that to him, the poor man.
And through you, Madam Chair, and some of that surplus is hard to extract. Like a surplus inside of the long-term care homes is shared with the city of Pembroke. So it's difficult to extract that surplus and apply it to a road, though it does go a long way towards our capital needs inside long-term care. there are some quirks to that an absolute surplus may not lower our required reserve contribution by the same amount, because some of it is tied up in long-term care as opposed to other items which we might need the money for. So that there's some quirks there. And I don't think I have a prediction yet, but I do concur with Councillor Donahue that the year has been going very well in almost all departments.
Go ahead.
Just as a follow-up, if I may, Madam Chair, the reason I posited that particular question is that the end of this year is just over 4 months away, just under 4 months away. So I think that it is not unreasonable to look for a projection, since our long-term financial plan is projecting what our finances are going to be 5 years from now. I don't think that it is unreasonable to suggest that by the end of September, we might have some notion based on year to date.
And through you, Madam Chair, yes, for our November update to the long-term financial plan, we will have a formal projection of where we expect to end the year, and that's what we will use for our thinking there. So we will have it in time for our long-term financial plan update.
All right, anything further? So, all in favor, please. Excellent, that carries. And now I've got a recommendation that the Finance Division report be approved as presented, except for number 3. May I have a mover and seconder, please? Warden, member from Laurentian Hills, all in favor? All right, and now we'll go back to number 3, please. Member from Amaston Bromley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and committee will recall that I first broached this conversation, or let me rephrase that. The conversation that I broached in August was that I felt that it would be appropriate to decouple. There are 2 particular items associated with Resolution FACC 230873. The first is that it shall be based on the formula to essentially establish an annual inflation rate predicated on June 30 rather than December 31. The second component was that the adjustment shall not be lower than any increase negotiated with any union collective agreement. And at that time, we had somewhat of a discussion, and the recommendation that evolved out of that was perhaps today, when there was going to be a discussion about budget formula, the budget schedule and recommendations to council, that would be an appropriate place to broach this. So ultimately, that is what I am doing here. That is why I sought to have this severed from the report. And ultimately, when I am looking at this, beginning on page 95, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 5 bullet points. And I did find it curious that in all of the bullet points, they are all pros on the current status, and there are no cons. And I think that there are legitimate arguments could be made of the challenge of particularly that second element. I note on the very first bullet points, it says the compression issues, but I think that the non-union wage increases are rather blunt instrument to address compression issues. I think there are probably much more elegant solutions where a scalpel rather than a sledgehammer might be used. The third bullet point is regarding the classification review system, and unto itself, it essentially nullifies itself every 5 years. I'd recommended, I think when we discussed this, that perhaps that could be amended at some point to 4 years. I think it would be appropriate within each term of council. But ultimately, that 5-year period plays out, and whatever inequities that may exist, they can be addressed through that means rather than through the annual non-union wages. I would also say on that the County of Renfrew doesn't keep up. The County of Renfrew participates in the establishment of. So every time we make a change, it is that the researcher is impacting the research that they are doing. We are changing the number by our contributing to it. On the fourth bullet point, it says it could lead to significant decline in morale among non-unionized employees. So if we accept that, it would not seem unreasonable to suggest that the negotiating teams for the various unions may find it a challenge if they are undertaking negotiations that are inuring to the benefit of non-union. I can imagine that if I was in that position, I would say, well, perhaps they could contribute some of the union dues then, if they are going to benefit from the negotiations that I am engaging in that are inuring to their benefit. On the fifth bullet point, in my experience as a county councillor, there have often been times when the non-union wage increases were exceeding the collective agreement increases. Certainly pre-COVID. Post-COVID, I think that is less likely. There's another line in there. It is crucial for maintaining a satisfied and engaged workforce that it helps prevent the desire to unionize. In my tenure in this room, there have been no new unions formed, and there has been one union is decertified. So it seems that there is a progressive approach towards labor relations, union and non-union. And I think that both, there is room for both in the county of Renfrew, and I think it's appropriate for both, but I don't think that that's necessarily a concern. And ultimately, if it is perceived that the morale within the non-union ranks may be affected if they are not to see the same increase, then I'm left wondering, is there not a compelling argument from any of the other unions then to simply say, well, we want whatever the most increase is as well? They're also employees of the county of Renfrew. The final item, and I do note that I believe discussions have begun in long-term care, or at least the preparation for discussions to begin with respect to ONA, and I know that Renfrew County Housing Corporation is due as well. I think that's in the report here. So I'd just like to bring to everyone's attention, and this is public information. There was a news release came out from the provincial ONA on May 21st. And in a provincial arbitration, the arbitrator awarded to ONA within what they refer to as nursing homes as opposed to long-term care. Presumably, our homes fall within that ambit as well. But ultimately, the arbitrator's award for the province was 8.5% for 2024 and 3% for 2025. So I have no idea what may be the provincial issues that the Ontario Nursing Association may be addressing, may be adapting to. I do know that there was some legislative wage increases by the provincial government at some point. I don't know. But ultimately, if that arbitration had happened at the end of 2023 and our negotiations with ONA through the long-term care sector, might we be looking at an 8.5% for non-union? Like, it's so out of our hands, and I think that we as council don't know what may be existing across the province. On this, I kind of skipped right over the second bullet point where it's saying that the non-union are not benefiting from some of the non-monetary or some of the benefit issues. It seems to suggest that the collective agreements that we have had, that the unions have gotten the benefits that they wished and they got the wage rates that they've wished for. So I'm not sure that that's a compelling argument. At the end of the day, I'm quite satisfied with the COLA increase and the new formula. I'm not entirely sure why it is saying it shall not be less. If, in fact, the highest collective agreement was less than COLA, why would the non-union be getting more? I know that that was the case when it was discretionary, when council was making that decision on an annual basis. And I know for all of the years pre-COVID, the actual COLA that was put in place for non-union exceeded the inflation rate for the previous year, in some cases substantially. So I don't understand why there is a thou shalt have the higher of in the case of non-union. And I think that all of these are certainly plausible arguments, none of which were presented in this report, but I think that they are definitely worth considering. On this one, just the difference between 0.8 and 25 is $42,000, and that's a very small percentage increase. You'll note even from the charting that the non-union are 30 32% of the wage of compensation from the county of Renfrew. I note that ONA is, let's call it 4%. So ultimately, if 4% of the wage component for the county of Renfrew may establish what the wages are for 32%, and it seems absurd when I view that. I don't know what may be the highest, but there are 5 different collective agreements. Each of the 5 are cited there. So we do know that there has just been a ratification of, I believe, a 3-year agreement with the paramedic service. So we do have outstanding with CUPE, RCHC, and with ONA. So there is a possibility that it could in fact be higher than 3.08, depending on what those wage rates may be established in our current environment. So I think that it is precarious to predicate potentially 32% of our annual wage based on what a collective representing 4% may do.
Pardon me? I don't know. I thought maybe one of you wanted to comment. Was there a question? Yes.
Well, I guess the first question is, did none of these arguments that I am raising, did they not consider them when the report was being put together? I think that those are particular challenges. Council may be prepared to accept them, but I think that they are what I would suggest cons with respect to the current resolution, or the resolution that is driving the non-union wage increase.
I'll allow Chair, I'll allow Mr. Burke to answer the question. However, typically, I don't know if it's typically, this was a resolution of council, so to suggest a negative against a county council resolution would be difficult for staff to suggest. However, because we'd be essentially saying that your resolution is wrong, but to have those in there, I think they resonate. I think we're just suggesting that you're not wrong on some of your cons, but we could also add more to them, or more pros to. I don't know if Dan, you want to touch this at all, or suggest otherwise. It's your report.
Sure, and thank you, CAO, and through you, Chair. I would suggest, at a staff level, we are cognizant of the risk involved in that coupling the not less than the highest negotiated union agreement, especially with some of the smaller unions that have niche situations. But also, certainly from the HR and recruitment and retention perspective, our concern, again, not necessarily with I think the decoupling of the two mechanisms, but to make sure that our non-union staff are treated the same as the bulk of our union staff, and that they're not perceived to be falling behind their unionized counterparts. So that's why all of the points lend in that direction, is that's the risk we see. Again, this year, it's really not a major issue. As I pointed out, the two are relatively close, 0.18% away from each other, which is an absolute cost of $42,000, but most of those are cost shared in some fashion. So our thinking, at least, that resolution may cause problems further down the road, but at the current, when we look to the 2025 budget and our current HR recruitment retention issues, we'd like to keep the majority of our unions and non-union increases at the same amount. And that's the argument we're trying to make. I'm not sure if my colleague would like to.
Yes, member from Evanston Bromley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd first like to address Mr. Kelly's comment. Wrong or right is not what I was aiming at, because I think that there's a value assigned to that, it's not wrong or right, it is risk-benefit. And what I'm saying is that every one of the bullet points is citing the benefit, and not a single bullet point identified what the risk is, which Mr. Burke just identified. There exists a not insubstantial risk that a smaller collective agreement could have, even though it may have a relatively modest, in terms of the corporation, impact on wages. Once it gets applied to non-union, it has become order of magnitude larger than where it is cited. That is the key for me, is that it is putting this out of any discretion of council. As I have indicated, I believe probably from 2015 through 2020, 6-year period, I believe that non-union exceeded the highest collective agreement wage increase on an annual basis. I haven't run the numbers subsequent to that. I expect that COVID has thrown a lot of that into some turmoil, but I would suggest if non-union are perceiving that, then they may not necessarily be perceiving how it has worked all the way through. And I do know that there is human nature of that it's what did last year do, or what did the last 2 years do? But I think that the approach needs to be much more longer term. In any event, that was, as Mr. Kelly had requested, if there was a question. So what I'm going to put a motion on the floor, and we did discuss this at our last meeting, rather than notice of motion, the committee itself is the notice. So, Madam Chair, by your leave, and it is somewhat flexible. I put two together because I'm not sure on the approach. So I'll identify the first one. I move to repeal Resolution FA-CC-23-08-73 and replace with identical wording, save and accepting, and further that this adjustment will not be lower than any increase negotiated within a union collective agreement. I put that in front of Mr. Kelly to consider whether it should be repealed and replaced, or whether it would be more appropriate to amend that resolution from last year.
Okay. Do you have a seconder for the motion no matter what?
So I don't know, but I want to know which would be a preferable motion to put on the table.
They're going to caucus over here. Please stand by.
Yeah, no, we're just conferring that we're on the same brain. No,
Okay.
the motion to amend is really when there's a motion on the table. This motion has been passed and it's gone through county council. This would be a repeal and replace.
A repeal and replace.
Fair enough,
Okay,
then.
good
I
enough.
should add that this should be a motion that FNA recommend to county council,
Yes.
that resolution, et cetera. Do you wish me to repeat?
Yes, please.
Okay. I move that the Finance and Administration Committee recommend to County Council to repeal Resolution FA-CC-23-08-73 and replace with a identical wording, saving and accepting, and further that this adjustment will not be lower than any increase negotiated with any union collective agreement. So it would be to excise only that phrase.
Okay. I got it the second time. Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Member from North Algona Wilberforce, discussion. Warden?
Okay, and I've been trying to sort out what I've heard in closed over the last 20 years and what I've heard in public. So I'm going to be very brief. Do we have any policies or initiatives? And I thought I remembered something where we had committed to a specific retention program with adjusted costs or adjusted funding or some measures. And I don't know if that was for a specific division or whether it was sunsetted. So that, and then I thought there were some components of either Stratcor or Gallagher or somebody like that who had made a presentation to us And so I don't want, and I'm not trying to confound this, I don't want us tripping over ourselves and having to repeal what we repeal. So those are the questions I have, and I was busily trying to find them as well, but I can't find the information because I don't store things very well.
Through you, Chair, to the warden. No, we don't recall anything in terms of that tying anything. I will note we did bring a report forward several months ago. I don't remember the exact month, where we brought forward a recommendation to re-engage Gallagher prior to the term limit, that they would come back. That motion was defeated at this committee, and the suggestion, if not the recommendation of Gallagher, was to maintain I don't know, what would you call it, an equal, not an equal, but that increases would be, carried throughout the corporation in terms of retention. I think that was mentioned in the report as well, but there was no hard and fast policy. It was more of a suggestion to maintain your 55th percentiles, that we maintain several levels amongst all divisions, but it wasn't.
Okay, I thought it was part of one of those reports too, where there was going to be parity across the corporation.
That was the suggestion.
That was
That was the suggestion, but it wasn't a hard and fast rule, right? There was no hard and fast rule.
Oh, I see.
I think what you saw was this resolution that was back last August was a result of some of those discussions we had with Gallagher in terms of finding parity.
Okay.
That was our solution at the time.
Okay, any other discussion? Warden?
Okay, and so if I could just get a sense of what the consequence of the motion proposed would be, just from the member or from anybody, just to explain it a little more succinctly for me.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just in response, it is simply to decouple those two things. And I will frankly apologize to this committee and to council. When this resolution was passed in 2023, I must have been asleep at the switch, because even though I found the formula very cumbersome and arcane and obscure, nonetheless, having that annual inflation rate seems to me to be an eminently reasonable approach to increasing the wage grid. That there is a secondary component that is essentially saying it shall be the higher of these things without having any consideration to why any collective agreement may have been higher, they shall have that as well. I don't know what non-monetary issues may have been solved. I'm absolutely not going to engage in anything that we described or discussed in a closed session of where the employer management may perceive that there is a gain here, that we are prepared to do that there, that would be reflected in wages. So I am certainly absolutely prepared to abide by the formula that is based on actual inflationary pressures, because outside of that, if the scope of the job, and we've already gone through the discussion about the finance technicians and adjusting the scoring, they are doing different jobs. It is appropriate that they receive different compensation. COLA is meant to be a cost of living adjustment. That's what the annual inflation calculator is, and what we've done is even advance to that, so essentially the year end, the 12-month period ending June 30th, in order to prepare for January 1st is what we're using. That to me seems eminently reasonable, and that is why I'm suggesting only having that as the component and completely sever any relation between the non-union wages and union wages. They are two distinct entities, and I'm confounded to understand why we would tie them together.
Okay, so you were not asleep at the wheel. You brought up all the same arguments last year when we were discussing this. Yes, twice. And I think James also spoke to it, if I'm not mistaken, if I go back to the minutes. Anyway, is there any other discussion? Member from North Algona Wilberforce.
Obviously, thank you, Chair. Your memory is better than mine. I'm not sure, I'd have to go back and review the minutes as well, but I agree with my colleague that those years where the inflation rate provided an advantage in wage increases over some of the union negotiated contracts. Again, every year that the increase compounds based on those gains there, to me, more than make up for the small gap that exists now. And I tend to agree with my colleague that I like the idea of sticking with the annual inflation adjustment.
Okay, anything further? Then I will call for everybody understands the motion on the table? I'll call for the vote. All in favor? And that carries. I should ask for a mover and seconder to receive this as information, though, correct? Just as the last information item. All right. I'll ask for a mover and seconder for item number 3, just as an information item that obviously got changed. Moved by Killaloo, Haggerty, and Richards, seconded by the member from Laurentian Hills. All in favor? Excellent. And now I will pass this over to Greg for his Human Resources report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to committee. So information item number 1 in the HR report today is Algonquin College Municipal Day. So tentatively set for October the 16th of this year is a municipal career fair at Algonquin College's Pembroke campus. The goal will be to have the county there representing our diverse career opportunities and options that exist at the county. I believe this is also being offered to all of the lower tier municipalities to attend as well, to give everyone that's at the college an opportunity to see the careers that exist within municipal government across the county. Information item number 2 is employee recognition. Our policy obviously was passed of April last year, and this is the Q2 2024 winners attached in the appendix, as well as a reminder for those folks that the Q3 recognition deadline is September 30th of this year. And Madam Chair, I'll pause there for questions.
Perfect. Item number 1, the Municipal Day. And item number 2, our employee recognition. I love this program. Nothing. Okay, we will move on to bylaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first bylaw is around employment bylaw number 1, and the recommendation is that the Finance and Administration Committee recommends that County Council approves the following changes to employment bylaw number 1 effective October 1st, 2024. Changes to the student wage from $15.60 to $16.20 for students under 18 and from $16.55 to $17.20 for students 18 and over, as outlined in Schedule A. Renaming of the Ontario Works Agent to Ontario Works Caseworker in Group 6. Removal of the accounting technician position in Group 6, addition of a senior accounting clerk in Group 5, a financial analyst position in Group 7, and a senior financial analyst position in Group 8, reclassification of the payroll administrator from Group 6 to 7, reclassification and renaming of client program supervisor in Group 7 to resident/client outreach program supervisor in Group 8, and further that the revised employment bylaw number 1 be adopted.
Thank you. May I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by the member from North Elguna-Wilberforce and seconded by the member from Killaloo, Haggerty, and Richards. The backgrounds there, was there anything that you wanted to touch on specifically? You good?
Nope.
Excellent. Any discussion? All in favor? And finally, number 4.
Perfect. So this is around corporate policies and procedures. The recommendation is that the Finance and Administration Committee recommend to County Council the approval of the following amended corporate policy, Policy A14, Retirement and Early Retirement, an amended policy, and that a bylaw to amend Bylaw 6303, being a bylaw to establish human resource corporate policies and procedures for the County of Renfrew, be adopted. In the background, sorry.
Thank you. May I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by the member from Laurentian Hills, seconded by the warden. The background is there. Was there anything that you wanted to touch on?
No, it's...
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you, committee. And I have a recommendation that the Human Resources Division report be approved as presented. May I have a mover and seconder, please? Warden, member from Amherst Bromley, all in favor? Is there any new business? I see none. We have no closed meeting. The date of our next meeting is Thursday, October 17th, 2024. And I have a recommendation that this meeting adjourn and the next regular meeting be held on Thursday, October 17th, 2024. May I have a mover and seconder, please? I'm going to call on the member from Deep River and the member from Amherst Bromley. All in favor. And we are adjourned. Thank you, committee.